So I've really been thinking about another one of my favorite villains again. Today, I want to discuss a really awesome villain. One that I really look at, and even though, he's a villain, he's a bad guy, he does bad things, but I'm like, you know what? You're real cool. And that's Doctor Doom, otherwise known as Victor Von Doom. His story is a very interesting one. It's changed at times throughout history, where he used to just be some foreign exchange student who went to the same university that Mr. Fantastic from the Fantastic Four went to, and like the two of them were like the most intelligent, basically the smartest men in the room. And so that kind of led them to butt heads, but they also became friends. And due to that friendship, when the one became more villainous, it turned their friendship into just an outright rivalry between them. My favorite portrayal of Doctor Doom is he was a young man living in Latveria, which is the country he's from. It's a fictional country, it's not real. He's from Latveria, and at the time, while he was young, there was a dictator in power over the country. He was tyrannical. He was sending people off to, like, just random people off to the mines. Terrible sort of things. And there's a pretty sad part when his family is fleeing the country. But the only members of his family that survived were him and his father, who then got caught in like a blizzard. Then his father sacrificed himself to save Victor by essentially covering Victor with his body and keeping him warm. And then he perished. So the young Victor Von Doom was left alone. He then wandered out into the wilderness and began setting free these people who were being lorded over by the dictator at the time. And there was this uprising that swept over the whole nation of Latveria, where it ends with Victor killing the dictator and now assuming his role as the new ruler of Latveria, which is something that is very interesting, because when people look at villains, a lot of the times the villains are kind of one note. Like when you look at the villains that I've discussed previously, like the Manhunters and the Unstoppable Juggernaut, they're quite flat in what they want to do. But Doctor Doom is quite a nuanced character. Like, just taking the villain title aside, he is quite nuanced. Like, he's a dictator. Means he's a bad guy, right? Well, kind of, but not really. He's a dictator, and he rules with an iron fist. But under his rule, his nation is like well on its way to becoming a first world superpower. There's no poverty. Everything is just better with him around. And so we have to stop and ask ourselves, okay, that's pretty intense. Is he that bad? Well, I mean, yes, the guy's still a villain at the end of the day. And what he wants is to, well, firstly, protect his people of Latveria, which is a very interesting point to his character, is that he's not some villain that's just like, oh, I casually just conquered this nation. I don't really care about the people here. No, like he actually cares about his people, and his people care about him as well. They kind of love him in their own special kind of way, which is really funny because nowadays, imagine trying to write a character who's a dictator that's actually loved by his people. Woo! You're going to get accused of some pretty ridiculous things, you know what I'm saying? Let's go further back to his whole family. Let's go to the reason why only him and his father were the last surviving members of his family. So, his mother was a gypsy. And through one misstep or another, she ended up losing her soul to Mephisto, which is basically Marvel's version of the devil. And ever since, Victor has been trying to obtain power to challenge Mephisto for his mother's soul, so that she can be laid to rest, essentially. And it's really sad because Mephisto is extremely powerful, especially in his own world where he's basically a god in his own little pocket dimension. And so Mephisto came to Doctor Doom and was like, "Listen, here's the deal. Every year, one day on that year, you can challenge me to a fight. If you win, you get your mother's soul back. But if you lose, your people and the world will hate you just a little bit more. And so every year Doctor Doom tries to get his mother's soul back and he fails, which is kind of a funny plot beat because it adds to the fact that everyone just hates him, and it's like, why? Well, turns out Mephisto is pulling strings behind closed curtains, you know. Nice guy, Doctor Doom. He's just trying to save his mom. Now, to the rocky history of portrayals that we've had of Doctor Doom. When you look at Doctor Doom in movies, there's no great portrayal of Doctor Doom in film, you know. There was the first two Fantastic Four movies, Fantastic Four and then Rise of the Silver Surfer, and then the more recent flop, Fantastic Four, or Fant Four Stick, as people like to refer to it. Yeah, Doctor Doom wasn't really done justice in those. The one portrayal where you will see Doctor Doom get done justice, other than the comics, is in animated shows. These portrayals usually get Doctor Doom as this sort of really powerful and scheming kind of man who is present, but he tends to be in the background because that's where he wants to be. He doesn't want to be in the foreground. He wants to let his plans go off without a hitch. But whenever the need arises, he steps up and fights. I mean, there's a whole fight scene in the Avengers cartoon where he kidnaps two superheroes at the time we don't know what he's doing, but he's doing experiments on them. He's like scanning them. And so obviously the teams that these two superheroes are members of, the Fantastic Four and the Avengers, they rock up to his castle, kick down the door, yeah, we're the Avengers, and then a fight ensues. Doctor Doom pretty much spanks them silly, waltzes up his staircase, sits on his throne, and is just like, you're trespassing on my Latverian soil, leave. The character of Doctor Doom, as I stated earlier, is very nuanced. He's not just a one-note villain. If you just look at him from a very, dare I say, with a shallow perspective, like you kind of just look at the actions that he's done, you know, oh, he's tried to take over the world. He's fought our heroes many times, not just the Fantastic Four. He's fought the Avengers, sometimes at the same time. So he's really a villain that's a part of the larger world rather than just like, oh, I'm just some dictator that the B team tries to fight. No, like this guy fights like the A-list teams, you know what I'm saying? It's been well developed that Doctor Doom wants to obtain what he likes to call absolute power, right? And if he ever got his hands on that power, he would take over the world and make it his own utopia, essentially. And that's a pretty scary prospect because, well, I mean, he is kind of a villain, so you don't know what he might do to the world. But overall, I welcome our new overlord, Doctor Doom.